One of the questions that I do believe everybody is going to be asked is, who is Blaine? You know, and when I was first asked that, I kind of laughed, and then it just kind of hit me, you know, that you know, everybody's going to give all these different kind of answers, you know, and I know what all the answers are going to be, you know, and the fact of the matter is, he's just my son and I love him.
You're invited to my party.
I know.
The party's on the 15th.
That's it.
Even
That's
though
all
my
I'm gonna say.
real birthday's on the 11th.
So what'd you do yesterday?
I got an Xbox.
Did ya?
And apparently every day there's only one thing I want, no matter what day it is.
What's that?
I'll give you a hint. It's the opposite of hostile.
I don't know what that is.
You know, the opposite of a really, really bad day. That's what it means.
So every single day you just want a really good day?
Exactly. A peaceful day. As in, not bugged, just left alone, in peace.
One thing that just blares in my mind is he had this feeling that, you know, he wasn't normal. And although he was okay with that, he knew that the only way that he could fit in here was if he became normal.
Oh, did you cheat on that one? You cheated on that one.
Blaine, this is hard. Blaine is funny, he's lovable, he's explosive, he does his own thing when he wants to do his own thing. You name it, he can be whatever he wants to be.
He is extremely independent, extremely independent. But yet at the same time, when he is around a group of people, you know, he's a prankster and a jokester and so forth.
But he is truly the love of my life.
How would I define autism? That's an interesting question. So let me start with how I defined autism before I really knew what it was. And we'd be going back now quite a ways. So my son is 13 now. I think the actual diagnosis was second grade, but I do remember having the discussion, and we knew that there was something different, and terms like sensory processing disorder were being tossed around, and then, you know, autism got thrown out.
I have seen so many instances of, as soon as somebody hears the label, professionals or others hear the label autism, they have this mental picture of what that individual looks like, and I do not believe that to be true.
Like anybody else, you know, you Google it, and I'm reading, and I'm going through there, and as I'm reading through it, I'm autistic, and then it's like, everybody I know is autistic because all the symptoms for autism are there. So then, as a parent, you're like, there's no way that my son has autism because this is everybody, you know. So why are they labeling him and putting that out? And back then, I had a really hard time with labels because I was labeled and had several labels attached to me growing up, and that's the last thing that I wanted for my son was to be labeled anything.
With a smile.
Smile. Get it over with.
Smile. I'm not going to take it until you smile.
First race, it's awesome.
Sweaty balls.
Sweaty balls. Blaine,
All right, I think we got it. Right?
Blaine, no.
This is not worth it.
Autism is a brain disorder, and it affects your social ability, cognitive function, physical development. I don't use that definition to define what I do in my approach to working with children with autism. I'm thinking of it as the individual that is, you know, in front of me. Where are they at today? What are our goals? What can they do today? Where are their interests? That's the most important thing.
I don't think anybody's really unable to learn. They're just going to learn at different capacities.
It truly is a spectrum. We're going to look at every single student and their needs individually, and then make decisions based on the student's needs.
So that's how I define it now, is it's a spectrum, and then it's a matter of navigating the child through the spectrum to try to determine, you know, where they're going to fall, where they can always improve.
Educators and professionals alike often use the label of autism as an excuse for, oh, he cannot learn because he has autism, or if a student is struggling with something, it's because of the autism label. And we look at, well, if a student is struggling, we need to look at how are we teaching, what can we do differently.
I'm not convinced that there's a cap on any of this. You know, behaviorally, there may be some children with autism that may never behave better than, say, a third grader. But that doesn't mean that with work and practice and teaching and education that you can't get them to behave as a fourth grader. And if they can behave as a fourth grader, then they can behave as a fifth grader. I think a lot of people just give up too soon, or they quit too soon, instead of trying to seek out greater resources to try to move them ahead. I need to put out there that, you know, I am married, you know, I do have a wife, you know, and we are in this together. You know, we've been in this together from the very beginning, and that doesn't mean you're going to agree on everything. And I was very stubborn, as I said earlier, very hard-headed because of my own past and what I had to deal with that, because that was my frame of reference, and it was the only frame of reference I had. So with Tracy, she didn't have that frame of reference, which in this case turned out to be really good because we had very, very different opinions, which led to, you know, a lot of struggles and a lot of fights, but also to a point to where she was able to realize, you know, autism kids throw their fits, well, adults do too.
You think you can beat your dad in arm wrestling? Really?
It's not yet.
We're gonna have to.
He's pretty much Hulk Hogan.
You got to step up because you got to be able to provide some type of role model and assurance that they can get better, you know, as they get older, instead of just, you know, ditching them and saying, I can't deal with this, because you can't. You know, life is about dealing with shit. That's all it is dealing with shit. As soon as you start saying, I can't deal with something, then you lost. Not just that, but everything. Raising a kid alone is a big thing. I think a lot of people underestimate that in itself, but that's another topic for another day. But this becomes a more challenging issue here, and you got to be able to work together. And I think the reason why the divorce rate's so high with parents of children who are on the spectrum is because of that. You know, you have people that aren't stepping up and taking responsibility to work together towards the same goal. But keep in mind that goal isn't how you feel and what's most convenient for you. The goal is what's most convenient to help your child advance and get better and move forward.
When we first started experiencing difficulties within the school system, the public school system, you know, it was very challenging, and it basically, the success was dependent upon the teacher that he got. Unfortunately, there are some individuals that are not educated in the world of autism, and it's very hard to get Blaine the help and give him the direction that he needed at that point.
Because the school system became an unsafe environment, and when every child is entitled to a safe educational environment, and if they can't provide that, then it's up to the school system to do what they can within the IEP to provide a safe environment for your child. So for us, it was moving in home for the education, so the teachers would come to the house, and then ended up finding a school that specializes just in autism, which is the best thing that we ended up doing.
So we were fortunate enough to be introduced to Haugland Learning Center.
So we wanted to start a school where we look at these as kids. Yes, they have a label of autism, which doesn't tell me anything about the kid, and we wanted to create an environment where we set the high expectations. We much rather set expectations high and not meet them than setting them low and meeting these expectations and then not knowing how far could that child have gone.
You went from a situation where you had a kid that you couldn't have any conversation with. And now you can do like a book club with him where where he's reading and he's making inferences about what's going to happen next, and why does he think this character's motivations are like this or whatever, like more traditional academic stuff. So his progress is incredible, what we've seen.
3 greens, we get 50,000.
What would you do with 50,000?
I don't know. We'd have to split the prize by about 25,000 each.
Who? You or him? You and him, or me and you?
I don't think I get anything.
You're barely around that much, are you?
My main objective is for them to know when they're grown up, I was there. Even if it was, can you help me with this math problem, or they have this question, or they just want to show me something stupid on YouTube.
Good evening, everybody. Everything around here is a little different. We're moved into a new workout house.
The Angry Birds column, for those that don't know, is a series of articles that I wrote for elitefts.com in regards to just being a parent with a child that has autism, and even really before we even knew that, when we just with sensory processing disorder or whatever it was, just struggling with knowing that your child's different. There's a lot of frustrations, and there are a lot of frustrations that I was going through. The biggest being, the hardest one that I had to come to terms with was my child is not me. His childhood isn't going to replicate mine. Whenever I find myself very frustrated and confused, one of my coping skills is to write. And one night I came home, and it was after some social event that my son was at and we were at, and I was frustrated, man. And I just sat down and I just tapped this article out. I just wrote it for me. I didn't really write it for anybody else. I just wrote it to get my thoughts out of my head, and it was dealing with a lot of the frustrations that I was going through as a parent. When you have a child that's throwing fits for 3 hours, and other people just don't understand. You go to the zoo or wherever you're at and your child's throwing a fit, everybody's looking at you like, why don't you just spank the kid's ass? And they don't get it, and it's, so you're getting pissed off. And looking back, years later, that's not what they were saying. That was just this false reality bullshit that I was playing in my head. But when I put it all out on paper, I was able to come to terms with all that. Then when I went back and read it, and I had some things in there that were actually helping, that were working, with us at the time, I figured, what the hell? Let me just throw this out, and I'm going to throw it out as a training log post and see what happens. The feedback was overwhelming, and the feedback was from other parents saying, look, I'm in the same situation, and a lot of feedback of, Dave, don't worry about it, I've been through this. And when I say feedback, it's more feedback than I received from any other article or post I've ever made. And this was from parents, it was from educators, it was from people that are on our own team that I didn't even know worked with children with special needs. Reaching out saying, look, if you have any questions or you need help, I'm there. I had contributors want to submit to the series who were educators to be able to step in and say, look, I will write this, but I'm going to do it anonymously because I'm going to tell how it really is. I'm not going to tell what our administrators want to know or what the government wants to know. It says, I'm going to tell you exactly how to navigate this, but I don't want to put my name to it because I don't want to get fired from it. And then I continue to keep posting, as we learned and as we moved forward, up into a point where there really wasn't a whole lot to post anymore, because things get better. They really do get better. And as a parent and a child on the spectrum, if you don't have them in the right educational institute or the right system for them to learn, it's very frustrating. And then once we got him seated in the right system for him to be able to learn and to grow, it got better. I'm not saying that there's still not struggles, but you also grow as a parent and you grow as an individual.
Not this time.
this time.
You know, a lot of my Angry Birds articles kind of tapered off, and then Sheena started writing about the physical training. With Blaine, I wanted to bring him in and let him know and to show them that training can be a coping mechanism, because a lot of the sensory processing drills and exercises that he was doing when he was really young, physio ball related, all this kind of stuff was all kind of in my wheelhouse. And I'm like, I got this, I can do this, you know. I would bring him in the gym and start trying to train him, and it was just a utter failure every single time.
Dave's intent is he wanted Blaine to have something in his life, and if it be training, that he has something, an outlet. And so, you know, the daily stressors that he has to deal with, you know, going to school, dealing with a brother, you know, having events he has to go to that he doesn't want to go to, doing things that he doesn't want to do, all, you know, just regular things that we have to deal with. He wanted him to have an outlet, and that be the gym.
And I'm not trying to get him to bench and squat and do all this other stuff. I'm just trying to do him basic physical development stuff. And it's just, I sucked, you know, and it wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I've trained, you know, clients that never exercised before in their life. I've trained other kids, I've trained everybody, but I can't train my own son. You know, it was frustrating as all hell. And he did some training with her, and it clicked. And she has a background working with children with autism, so I just kind of let it go and would watch from the outside to not be distracting.
Dave just wanted to have this gym be something that was home for Blaine.
Blaine's training with Sheena, it is has been a development and a friendship that has grown over the years. It's something that Blaine looks forward to, and it helps him develop socially as well. And he's able to use the training as an outlet to his frustrations, and it's also, you know, also provides some obstacles to challenge him to control those frustrations.
From the early years, it started out as we're here to play, we're here to accomplish something. It could be just so minute, and if it is minute, it's fantastic, and we're gonna celebrate it.
From there, you know, proceeded to a once a week thing, and then progress started to be made after a period of time.
And so originally working with him, 9.5, 10 years old, I did see the classic, you know, autism traits. So we had to do things the same every week. He wanted to do the same exercises. It was hard for me to incorporate new exercises, new implements. There was a lot of fear.
What's going to happen if he has a meltdown? You know, that was my biggest concern, is she going to be able to handle, you know, if he has this meltdown? And anybody who has a child on the spectrum knows what I'm talking about.
So for example, you know, all of his early childhood, he just saw guys in the squat racks, you know, squatting, they're pouring out sweat.
He had a hell of a time just squatting and just sitting on a box and standing up, or any type of squat movement. And this went on for a long time, and you know, I'm trying to figure out, probably more so than what she was, why in the hell has he got such a problem with this? You know, I love squats, you know, why? Then it kind of dawned on me one day that
they're in pain.
So he wasn't seeing the celebration after the lift, he was seeing what was going on during it, and in his mind is processing, I'm not doing that ever.
Squat would be a buzzword where that just immediately was associated with pain and pressure and something that he didn't want anything to do with.
And a regular trainer is not going to understand that. Somebody who's been around it will. And there's a lot of communication between myself and her in regards to what causes some meltdowns, you know, what are some triggers at home and so forth that better help her with the development of that.
3, 2, 1, jump!
We just started to expand as far as what was off-site, what was on-site. So again, I was trying to get us out of this thinking of training as only in the gym. I wanted to expand upon that. So, you know, we're going to trampoline parks, we're going to the playground, we're going to the trails. Just so when we think of training, we're thinking, you know, I can be active many places other than the gym. So An idea that I had was, okay, we're gonna use the track. There's plenty of things we can run bleachers, we can use the hurdles, we can just use the track and walk. And he agreed. There seemed to be like no issue. All right, we're driving to the school, we're having fun. Then we pull into the parking lot, and he immediately turned off the radio. It's silent, and everything just changes completely. I kept on driving, and then he was like, stop. And then he just let go. This is from going happy-go-lucky to screaming to telling me everything that had happened at this school, how the teachers made him feel, the bullying. One thing that just blares in my mind is he had this feeling that, he wasn't normal. And although he was okay with that, he knew that the only way that he could fit in here was if he became normal. So he's screaming, he's crying. At that point, all I knew, my rule right there was not to intervene. It was to let him express what came to mind. And we sat there for 20 minutes, and he calmed down, and I listened, and I did give him some feedback. At that point, he, as any child, he wanted retaliation. He was talking about how they made him feel, and this is what he wanted to do to get back. And at that point, I felt this is my duty. This is the only thing that I need to really say is, hey, when you were here, you had these set of children, you had these teachers. They're probably no longer here, and if you were to ever retaliate, you really think that's going to solve the problem? And then we were just going back and forth, and he's like, yeah, you're right. So then it was the next thing in mind was, okay, so are we going to stay here, or are we going to go back to the gym? And so I didn't propose it like that. I just said, all right, well, it looks like we got some bleacher runs to do. And it was okay. And so, we drove to the stadium, we got out, and we accomplished everything that we needed to do that day.
Thank you for napkins.
We have a tally system in place, and actually it was Dave's idea. And so if he earns eight tallies within a training session, it's worth a burger. McDonald's is a huge motivator for him, and it's something that they're actually using in his school for, it curves his behavior.
So when we talk about like the rewards that we do here, we will do anything that the kids want to work for that's appropriate. So, when Blaine hits his goals, he likes to work for fast food. And so a staff member will run out and make sure that he's got the fast food order exactly like he wants, and he gets excited about that. So
there we go. 2 seconds in. 3. Here we go. 7, 8. Stop. All right. So our first one was a 10:34. There came a time where it was just, again, it wasn't something that I forced, and it was an idea like, hey, you know what? I'm seeing that Blaine, again, this is based on his interest. He loves riding his bike. He loves going outside now, and we're working on sprints, and he likes to go on the trail, and when we're walking, he likes to run, and then he likes to walk and then run. And so it just became natural where I'm thinking, a good competition or something that we could strive to do with other people outside of the gym, outside of London, would be a 5K. The zoo already, with me and him, we already had this amazing association, fun, he loves animals. And so now we were expanding upon that. Now there was a 5K. How did I present this huge challenge for us? Was I used the dry erase board for one of his next sessions. I said, hi, Blaine, we're 12 weeks out of the zoo run 5K. This has us, and then I just created our schedule, just like I would for a normal training day. We're gonna start off at the gym. We're gonna drive about 45 minutes. Once we get there, we're gonna, put on our race shirts. We're going to walk and run 3 miles. When we're done, we have the rest of the day to be in the zoo. We're gonna drive home, again, 45 minutes, and we're done. And at first he was like, a 5K? What? A race? Oh my gosh, I just saw him cringe. But then it was like, then his gear started to turn, and he's like, wait a minute, this is at the zoo. Oh my gosh, do you remember, at the snake pit? And so It was, we moved from the race really quickly, and then we were just, we were thinking about all of the things that were going to be fun, all of the upsides to being there. So at that point, 12 weeks out, we knew, okay, we have something that we have to compete in 12 weeks. And so our training followed suit. It got to the point where we're having dialogue as, man, we need to get our legs stronger. We're 11 weeks out. And then it's brainstorming, what can we do, to now strengthen our legs so that when we come to race day that we're meeting our goals. Now we're having conversation about bench and deadlift, and we just got under the bar. It's a huge thing. We've never been in the squat rack with a safety squat bar on our back, and that, who would have thought, And again, if we never got there, that was fine, but we did.
Let's go, yeah, let's go. Get up, get up.
I wish I would have embraced it a little bit sooner, because now that I do define it differently and know how to define it differently, it opened up a spectrum of opportunity that otherwise didn't exist without having that. So when I speak to other parents who run into this type of situation, I tell them, don't think of it as a label, think of it as a way for you to get extra help and support that you otherwise would not be able to get, because that's really what it does. That label doesn't hold your child back, that label helps your child to move forward.